My question concerns business jets, business aviation. It looks as if things were rather frozen for the last while with the same players. Is there going to be a change there, do you think? The health crisis we're going through at the moment, might that be an accelerating factor? Well, we won't turn bad news into good news, says Mr. Trappier. No doubt it's more reassuring to fly in a Falcon these days than to take a regular scheduled flight. But anyway, this is a cyclical situation. We can't draw macroeconomic conclusions on the back of that. Now, the players, well, it's always the same players. We've got Gulfstream, Bombardier. We hear a lot about Bombardier, but, you know, there are main peer companies, Textron. Not an awful lot because it's a lower kind of range. And Embraer, these are the main players that are still around, yes, and we'll see what happens in the future in that regard. Thierry Vigoureux from Le Point. 40 Falcons ordered, you said. What's the share of governmental planes and ones that would be used for military applications? I mean, is this figure going up proportionately? Well, I won't give you an exact figure. But we've got already 4 JCG, Japanese Falcons, in the 40 for 2019. We had deliveries of 7Xs for Australia. These are VIP planes. They're not militarized planes. They're VIP planes. And we'll have shortly deliveries of airplanes for France, Archange, and later on the maritime surveillance aircraft for France. So slowly but surely, there is a trend, yeah, towards selling aircraft to governments. Yes. Christian Schubert from Frankfurter Allgemeine. I have a couple of questions. Firstly, on the Eurodrone. Do you not think the industry is asking for unreasonable prices here in that regard? And regarding FCAS, Indra is the coordinator for the Spanish partner, and Airbus has been quite clear about the fact it's not a good choice. Any opinion on that? On the MAL drone, the prices from industrialists are never silly. People very often want to bring down their prices, but that's what negotiation and bargaining is all about, isn't it? So in the prices, you've got the costs and you've got the risk evaluations, risk assessments. And some of you have written articles on this. If you take a contract like the Euromil, as was done at one point by 400M, from A to Z, the design, development, and series production, there are risks involved. You've got to provide for these risks in your books. That's the role of the project owner, the states organized among themselves. That's their business, let's say. And then you have the prime contractor who's got to analyze where the risks are. If the industrialists have to shoulder all the risks, well, they'll have to book provisions. They're called provisions for contingencies and risks. And, you know, it's normal for an industrialist to earn a margin. You've got to stay in business and earn money and not make a loss. You're not in business to make a loss, after all. So at the moment, there are certain things I know as a partner of Airbus, but it's up to Airbus to do its own negotiations with OCCAR, because the states have gone to OCCAR to conduct these negotiations. So we provide all of our support to Airbus in the context of these negotiations, but there's no question for the parties involved to for them to sell at a loss. No question of selling at a loss. Regarding FCAS, Spanish partner, well, it's up to the Spanish authorities to decide the way in which the Spanish industry should be organized, and that's what they did. Now, there was a slight difference of opinion between the Spanish authorities and Airbus. They wanted Airbus Spain to be the leader, and the Spanish authorities designated INRA as leader. For us in Dassault, there's no issue regarding all of that, because we can work just as well with INRA or with Airbus Spain. It doesn't matter. Formerly Casas, it's not an issue for us. It's a controversy that doesn't exist for us in France here in Dassault. It's not an issue. Hello, I'm from the Figaro. Could you please comment on the current talks going on in Brussels regarding the future budget for the European Commission? There have been proposals that there should be reductions in the space budget and the forecast budget for the European Defence Fund. Some countries have put on the table the need to bring down those budgets. If France wants to retain the CAP budget, what's going to happen to the other budgets? What will be the consequences for this industry in your group if those particular space and aviation defence budgets are brought down? Well, if we wear other hats, we could say that we've all pleaded together so that the European defence budget would remain at 13 billion. Now, we also have pleaded that the Research and Technology Fund, upstream of civil aviation, Clean Sky in particular, for example, that they should also be at the proper level they need to be at. We also pleaded so that the space budget would be at the right level, but the authorities of the countries, because it's the countries within the Council of Ministers that will have to agree on the breakdown of the budgets. Now, France is pushing in favor of everything, defense, upstream research, but also CAP for the farmers. So, there's a budget to be taken care of. The UK is exiting, so that is creating some new features on the landscape in terms of putting together a budget. And with MFF and all of this, the talks going on, we'll have to see what's the outcome of that. The industrialists are pushing forward these three main areas that I mentioned. Now, for Dassault, it has an impact that's not immediate, that's not direct. If we launch the NGF, the FCS, and the MALE, it's the states that will continue to fund this under cooperation agreements. Now, we could go and look for money from the European Defence Fund so as to provide match funding for programs. Depending on whether there's more or less money, we'll ask for some matching budget. But 13 billion is a long-term period for all the European countries. It's a minimum figure already, and some people want to bring it down. But it's the start of the defence efforts within Europe. Institutionally speaking, it's a more political than an economic marker, I would say. To move on to space now, I'd like to go back to the Space Rider. Now, will this project avail of all the previous work you've done with Hermes, or will you take Hermes out of your digital boxes, so to speak, or are you going to work from scratch, basically? No, we've got a lot of Hermes-based experience, but it goes back quite a while now. And there's still some things going on in the design office, but we have especially the affiliation with the XV experiments that we've already conducted with the Italians using the Vega rocket, and we've already done experiments. We've rolled out a small vessel that will come back and so on, that will return. So it's continuing that research and design work in a very practical way and moving into top gear with an object that would be a little bit more, fully constructed, completed, that might prefigure a more operational object later on. The Italians are real drivers in this, and they're the ones putting most money onto the table in the ESA. So with them, we have an excellent relationship to propose our services for the ESA research and design directly between ESA and Dassault, and as well. And we hope to pursue and develop that cooperation. It's going on in parallel, on a parallel track to the usual tracks that are the launchers, traditional Ariane launchers, or the satellites that are of interest to us via Thales as well, the satellites, but they're not within the remit of Dassault.
When it comes to developing the defense activities in the space area, I think that the company is thinking about how it can contribute in the future. Good morning. Quentin Lautrette for AFP. Back to the Falcon. Why can't you announce the launch of the new Falcon today? do you have a clear idea of the schedule of the announcement? Well, actually, I could announce this today, but I have decided that I wouldn't. So it's the art of timing your announcements, right? So we are currently working on the best date to make the announcement. There's a little bit of teasing here because I announced it in Las Vegas. I said that it was going to happen this year. It's the standard procedure, I would say. You know, you always announce your announcements in advance, and so I will give you the date later during the year, maybe during the first half of the year. Another question about FCAS. The decision of the succession of Tornado in Germany, the use of Eurofighter to succeed Tornado. Is this important for the FCAS project? Could it be like a bridge that could be important for FCAS? Well, it's always very difficult to comment on a foreign country. I would say that Rafale would be a good substitute for F-18. Of course, you will say that I'm being provocative, but I had to say it, right? Now, secondly, this might come as a surprise, but I think that Eurofighter could replace F-18. Thirdly, why hasn't this been considered? Well, because if I understand right, the press, the media, what they say in the media is that you need a U.S. nuclear armament. And so the U.S. say, okay, we're going to put the U.S. nuclear weapons on an American aircraft. So it's the only problem is the relationship between Germany and the U.S., and it's not a technical point. So I think it's just the authorizations had been given for Tornado, and apparently they're not there for Eurofighter. I have 4 quick questions. The first is about Falcon and the global market, because apart from the past few days, we've seen that air traffic has been going down on almost everywhere in the world. The second-hand market is also going south, and so I was wondering how you were feeling about this objective of 40 deliveries for 2020. Do you feel a little bit more comfortable than during that same period in 2019? The second question, I'll try it, on the pipeline of the Rafale. Can you tell us the status of the discussions or most interesting campaigns? And the third question is about your modernization plan for all your locations. Could you give us more information about the expected productivity gains and savings? And one last point about Bombardier. Do you think that the new Bombardier, which is exclusively centered on business jets today, could actually change their behavior compared to what they did over the past few years? Oh, that's a lot of questions. But about the first question about the 40 Falcon, well, if we announce this, it's probably because we think we're going to make it. That's what I can say today. I would have said the same about 45 1 year ago, and we only did 40. So this is not an exact science. So you never know. But we do see that the market is difficult to grasp. But I'm rather optimistic about the 40, I must say, about Rafale export. There are a certain number of things that I can tell you, and there are things that I won't tell you. What I can tell you is that we're competing in Finland and Switzerland. In-flight tests are going on. We're currently making new proposals both in Finland and in Switzerland. And during the course of 2020, we will continue the talks with the Swedish and the Swiss and Finnish authorities, for deliveries scheduled in 2021. For India, we are working, of course, on delivering the aircraft, and also we are working with the Indian Air Force and the Navy also, and so we are actively working on the projects in India. There are other prospects which I will not tell you about today. The third point is about the transformation plan. Well, of course, competitiveness is of the essence here. We are working on it to get our sites more specialized. As I said, we are working on the digital aspect. This hasn't been quantified for the moment, because if you don't use the digital technologies anyway, you won't survive, and so you have to do this. So we expect a return on investment in a few years. We're starting a cycle for the future Falcon, for example. We're starting the 3D experience platform today, so we expect a return on the production of the aircraft whenever we start producing it. We won't be able to compare because it's not the same kind of aircraft. There will be competitiveness gains. I can't tell you how much. I have numbers, of course, but I can't give you. I can't give them to you. And about Bombardier, I can't say much because, from what I understand, it's not quite finalized in the railway area. There is maybe the possibility that Bombardier would only be present in business jets. Well, I would say that I'd rather be the CEO of Dassault than the CEO of Bombardier right now. Good morning. You talked about supporting Airbus for the drones. How can you calculate the risk provisions? What's the equation here? So you say that you're bringing support to your industrial partner. What's the grounds for the 7.2? I'm not going to justify the price. 7.2, that's for the prime contractor to justify the price to the buyers. What I can say is that the way we make a price requires that you can calculate how much effort you are going to have to put into the development process. So that's the size of the teams, number of people involved, etc. It's also about deciding the way you are going to buy the materials, because you are working with suppliers. You need to make sure that you have control over your suppliers in terms of time, in terms of products. Plus, there's the risk provisions, because you know that in a program you will always have contingencies. You have to hope that you don't have a major contingency, but that's really important, and that's what you have to include in the contract. If you're working on a Falcon, you know that all the risk is on you, so you have to make your own assessments. If you're working on a defense system, you have to discuss with those who are going to buy the equipment and see how you are going to handle the risk. There are several possibilities. The British do it the old way. Basically, they pay in cost plus. That is, you have 30 people working on such and such package, and they have to pay for the 30 people. They measure that. So as you go, if you have more people, well, then they will pay for more people. And then there's the other method, which is to say, okay, we're going to give you a package, and then you will have to fit everything into the package, in which case you have to assess your own risk provisions in order to be capable of going through the project. It's what was done for the 400M. You see, it's difficult, but what I can understand is that the buyers always want the cheapest possible price, but you have to find the right balance. The balance is that it shouldn't be, of course, it's not beneficial for the buyer, for the supplier, if the buyer loses money. So, and the other way around. So you have to have a program in which you assess the risk, and so and you have a step for each risk, and you might take a package or a flat fee for each step of the process. This is why we went into prototypes of demonstrators. You manufacture the demonstrator, and then you can see if the costs are under control. For Neuron, for example, we said it would be 400 million euros for a Neuron with such and such features, and with DGA and our partners, we managed to weigh the risks and to balance the risks, and then we managed to actually fit into this budget of 400 million after 7 or 8 years. It worked, and we dispatched the risk that we were each willing to take, and it worked because we had the right features and we were on time. You know, this is really based on the skills of the prime contractor. There is no magical formula here. It's just based on your experience. So it's a question that you have to send to Airbus and Lockhart, because they are the ones discussing their own side together, and we contribute our skills in the areas that we said we would take our responsibilities in. Good morning, I'm from Challenge magazine. A question about FCAS. You must have seen what the German reporter in Bundestag said about this project. When it was voted, basically he said, okay, we're going to sign for 77.5 million euros because we can't say no, because President Macron is coming to Munich this weekend. We've seen more enthusiasm on other projects. So I was wondering if you were concerned about the German position on the FCAS, especially when it comes to the elected representatives. Well, you know, we have different methods in France and in Germany. So actually, we have to work ahead a lot in order to get a decision in Germany. It always ends in the Bundestag because it's a parliamentary democracy in which, at the end of the day, the budget is voted by the parliament. It's also the case in France, but in France we have a special law, the military procurement law, that allows the executive to operate with a certain number of delegations. So you must have noticed that it's not that easy in Germany right now. With the coalition in power, Germany is not like France, because you have Länder with their own interests, which might not always be the same. So in order to get the right configuration and get a positive decision at each step of the process, it takes a lot of work. However, you know, we said that it would happen before the end of 2019. It came a little bit later than that, at the very beginning of February. Well, I think we've done some progress. Of course, it took a lot of energy, a lot of meetings between the Chancellor and the President and the ministers, etc. So this is only the beginning of a great project. There's the symbol of Le Bourget air show, and then there's the 150 million euros that was signed a few days ago. But we are really looking at a program here which, if it is taken to the end, will amount to billions. So it's only fair that the beginning of the process is a little bit painful. The political choices were made between France and Germany. Spain also decided to join the two countries, France and Germany. So as a company, we will, of course, do what our government asks us to do, to cooperate, to make proposals, to organize the work, especially for fighter planes. And then there are other areas in FCAS. You've got drones, you've got engines, etc. So it is going to require a lot of work to gain confidence and trust. I'm confident that Germany is going to go for it, because you know that the German economic model is good. But, you know, in Germany, it's important to be able to work on projects together, each playing his part. And I think that this is really important, both for France and for Germany. So yes, I'm confident. Maybe I'm being a little bit naive here, but I am confident. Thierry Dubois, in the back here, I have two questions. What about Space Rider? What could be the use of an operational vehicle like Space Rider? And about the Rafale, what are the features that you've added to the F4 compared to what you told us last year? Well, in the Space Rider, you go to suborbital layers and back. So we are there as technicians. We provide the engineering to our Italian friends, who are the leaders of the project, because it's for them to imagine how they're going to design this little service shuttle that will actually perform work in these lowest layers of space, so you can think of anything, basically. The important thing is that you have to go there and come back. You start off from a Vega rocket and you come back with your own little vessel. So, about F4, the additions that we made are looking at a certain number of features, in particular communication features that were not ready 1 year ago and that we planned to add to the contract at the end of 2019, and this is what we did. It doesn't change the general scope of the F4 as announced a year ago. Good morning. Marco Baron. Actually, I have a question about your research or investment programs in artificial intelligence. There's Rafale F4 and FCAS. So what expertise do you already have in that area? And what expertise do you still need to grow? Well, for the moment in Rafale, there's no artificial intelligence. No, but what about later? Well, the DGA, the Army, notified Dassault and Thales that there will be contracts to prepare for an ecosystem with artificial intelligence features that will have to happen in the future. It's true in a certain number of fields. So we work with startups, we work with SMEs. Thales and Dassault are trying to imagine how we can introduce artificial intelligence on board combat systems or fighter planes. It can be navigation, it could be UCAV, for example, in which you would replace the man in the machine by an algorithm system that would be actually flown from the ground. So we are currently in the exploration phase of a project called MMT. MMT. That's the name of the project. So, startup companies, does this mean that you are going to acquire startups? No. We're not going to buy the companies. We just have contests and competitions, and people join the competitions, and the budgets that were allocated to us by the French Army will be dedicated to signing contracts with those small companies, because artificial intelligence is not just the big companies, it's also about creating a whole ecosystem of companies who are highly specialized. A lot of small companies have great ideas and great capabilities too. About the FCAS. Why are you so confident and so happy and so patient also, I must say? Because we now hear that the budget is going to be 150 million to be split between 10 companies, both in France and Germany, over a period of 18 months. And so if I do the math right, it means that it's going to be about 10 million for each company. And if I do the math right, what you showed us was that the revenue per employee is about 1 million. So you can only feed 10 people on this project. So it looks like with the FCAS, we were invited to a banquet, and actually 2 years later, we still haven't had a drink. It's still the pre-meal peanuts here. Oh, okay, so you want to do the math? I'm going to tell you everything about it. No, I mean, seriously, we have the Rafale. This is really our bread and butter today. Look at our revenue. If we have this historical high, it's thanks to the Rafale, because we delivered 26 aircraft, which was never seen before. So with the Rafale, the army and the government still place orders for development. The minister said that F4 was going to be about 2 billion euros. So we can actually feed the Rafale, I would say, for quite some time. And on top of that, governments have decided that when the Rafale will start to become a little bit old, when the Eurofighter will be a little bit older, well, then it would be nice to have a European plane rather than having to buy the future American aircraft. So it means that it's something that you have to start ahead. So instead of starting on our own, which we might have done because we have our background, we would have been capable of doing that. But they said you are going to have to do this with a partner. And so we could either say yes or no. And I decided that I would say yes. Why? Well, because I'd rather work with somebody else than not work at all when it comes to preparing for the future. Is this a guarantee that we will go all the way to complete development? Because, as I said, complete development would be tens of billions of euros because there's the plane, the radar, the whole system, the weapons. Because, we are preparing for a plane that might become operational in the first standard version in 2040. So it means that we are 20 years ahead of time. We're starting slowly, that's right. But when we started the Rafale, we also started slowly. How did it actually start? When did it actually start? When we had a prototype demonstrator. This is why I said, okay, I'm okay to work with somebody else, but I want a demonstrator. This is only the first step of the demonstrator. But still, it's a step. It's there. It's something. It's not just about communication. There is a lot of communication, I must say, but there is also something there too. There's a hope here, because if Germany was to buy F-35, it wouldn't be good. And this is the question that they have in Germany. This is the question that you asked about F-18. But 2 years ago, the question that was prevailing in Germany was, should Germany buy F-35? So that's the question. And the theory of F-35 is that it's the European preference. It's certainly not a European plane. So this gives us a little bit of hope that maybe we could do something, following the right methods, of course, to do something that would not be F-35. So yes, we will have to fight for that. Right. Oh, there's one last question here. Maybe this is going to be the last question. I'm Léo Barnier from Journal de l'Aviation. Do you expect a reduction in development costs for the new Falcon with the 3D Experience digital platform? If yes, how much? And what's going to be the total amount? I'm not going to give you the numbers. It's complicated because it's not the same aircraft that you're looking at. So it doesn't make sense. If it was on a base 100, I would say without the platform, we would not be as good. So, it's like the chicken and the egg. The platform makes us work better, and so we work better, and we need the tool even more. So, but in reality, what is important for you to understand is that the tool also changes the way you work. So this tool, this digital platform, is going to enable us to do what we've been dreaming of doing for quite some time now, but which we haven't done yet, which is a real platform in which the world of development and production and support will receive or will contribute a certain number of elements that will enable us to better monitor the program, to better manage it, to have a better management of configuration. So the answer is yes, there will be competitiveness gains. How much? Well, I will tell you that when we're done with the program. But of course, we have to gain in competitiveness. Anyway, it's a winning bet, because if we were to not do it, it would be worse. So it means that we have to do it, and I'm 100% convinced. And I think that I only have to thank you now and see you again soon. Have a good day.